Okay, so welcome everyone to the latest in our series of industry webinars. What are corporates looking for post-COVID? And this today is brought to us in association with our friends and business partners at Homelike. Please can I ask you all to submit questions during the course of the session, as we've done before at the bottom of the screen. We will tackle those towards the end, so just feel free to fire us some questions on the way through, and we'll do that as we go through. So before I start, I'm going to launch the first question. So if I can ask you, ladies and gentlemen, to have a look at that, and as we progress through the next couple of minutes, perhaps you can answer the questions that you think are appropriate to yourselves. So what I'd like to do firstly is introduce you to Dustin Figg. He's the co-founder and managing director of our business partner Homelike. Before Homelike, he successfully co-founded the HR startup Talents Connect and worked as an executive assistant to the CEO of Arvato. He also spent 2 years working in Silicon Valley. Through long-term work experiences in China, Spain, and the US, Dustin learned about the pitfalls of the highly offline long-term housing market, which eventually led to the founding of Homelike. Second panelist today is Cassia. Cassia Baker-Golab is the travel manager for Mobica Limited. Cassia has pursued a career in the tourism industry since 2013, starting as front desk agent at Radisson Blu Hotel, located in beautiful Krakow. As her first full-time job, it was a demanding one, but where Cassia gained lots of experience and understood the "yes, I can" philosophy. This attitude is Cassia's motto in her work with Mobica, managing business travels for their employees since 2016. For your information, Mobica is a global software services company delivering enabling technologies that transform business outcomes, but of course everyone knows that. So we're delighted after the session also to invite two more panelists to join us for the Q&A towards the end, and that will be Cherry Wang, who you'll know, country manager for UK and Ireland, and Cecilia Oliveira, senior account manager, and both of those ladies are from Homelike. So just before we start, the first poll, interestingly, we said, when do you expect to see business travel back to normal? Back to normal being pre-COVID levels. 4% of you said between 1 and 3 months. 21% said between 3 and 6 months. Interestingly, half of you, nearly at 49%, had said 2021, 16% said 2022, and 8% of you are not very hopeful, have suggested we will never return to pre-COVID levels. So how interesting. So thank you very much indeed. And at this point now, I'm going to hand over to Dustin. Dustin, thank you very much again for joining us, and over to you.
Yeah, James, thanks a lot for this very kind introduction here. Really happy to join this webinar, and also all participants here. What James actually mentioned, when you have any questions, we have plenty of time after kind of like a little of presentation of Homelike and Mobica to take any questions. Yeah, I'm the CEO and founder of Homelike. We are a marketplace for long-term accommodation, which means the minimum renting time is 1 month, with an average of around 3 to 4 months. We work in 9 countries and 400 cities roughly. Work with professional accommodation providers in the service department industry, but also boarding houses and very large suppliers from the real estate industry. A couple of additional points about our business. We started in 2015, so we are kind of like 5 years in the market now. I have 55,000 furnished and vetted apartments across Europe. 11,000 of those are actually in the UK, which is one of our main territories where we are operating. We work with 15,000 B2B clients across the world. 10% are actually from the US, from SME customers, but also up to very large corporate clients. And since our establishment in 2015, we have generated around 1.7 million book nights for our suppliers, which actually makes us the largest furnished apartment platform for business travel. Today we want to talk a little bit about pre-COVID, post-COVID, things we actually hear in the market, but I also want to remind the audience here about what the kind of main groups of travelers we are accommodating in our business, we can basically split them into two groups. One, what we call corporate, kind of like managed travel, which are project-based travel, relocation, new hires, trainees, where we are really, really strong at. Business travel as such, but we have also a large segment which we call individual travel. So individuals also like relocating, but these are bookings and transactions happening without a travel manager or kind of like a travel arranger or organizer being involved in the booking. Talking a little bit about COVID, and we actually found this graph super interesting here. So you see until week 8/week 9, this year was like a very, very normal kind of like traction on our business. And then suddenly, and it actually dropped above the cliff in week number 9, 10, where kind of like the first larger amount of corona cases approached Europe, followed by some very, very strict lockdowns in Italy and Spain, and then Germany and France actually followed. The UK was the last one in kind of like Europe who pursued a really, really strict lockdown. And the traction we actually saw on our platform across all territories, and we are operating in more than 400 cities, that Easter was actually the sediment of the traction we have been seeing. Another interesting fact here, since the last week of April, we see a gradual pickup in traction actually across markets. So it's not that only one market is picking up gradually, it's actually across all destinations. Some are actually recovering faster than others, but in general, the trend we see across all our destinations that more bookings are being made now. There are a couple of reasons for that. And an interesting metric we'd like to mention here, when you take a look at the search volume on search platforms, for example, Google, Yahoo, Bing, throughout the Corona period, this search amount was still very, very high. So compared to last year, we couldn't really see a huge drop in interest in long-term apartments, but there was a lot of hesitation in the market and a lot of uncertainty, especially from corporate clients, to make the decision to book something for the next couple of weeks or actually 2 or 3 months ahead of time, because they didn't actually know if they're allowed to travel. What we see now, that a lot of the corporate bookings are actually not canceled, they're rather postponed to the second half of the year. And that's probably also fueling a little bit the recovery, since we also see, since a couple of weeks, a higher share of B2B bookings being made on our platform. Another interesting fact we saw during Corona is, and when you take a look here at the different data points, usually we see about 50% of our bookings domestic and the rest is international. Due to Corona, that kind of like changed completely. So most of our transactions are domestic transactions, and I think the reasons are very obvious there. Due to the travel bans, travel restrictions, people are not allowed to travel between countries. That obviously has a huge impact on the share between domestic and international bookings. Nevertheless, what we also see that a lot of bookings we have recently generated are kind of like substitutes from the general rental market. So pre-COVID, the service apartment sector was kind of like separated from the traditional renting industry. So for really, really long terms, like couple of years. But what we see now, and that was obviously fueled to lower rates from suppliers in order to capture the remaining demand in the market, that now the prices became so competitive compared to the general rental market, that we also saw more traction from people who actually used to book on kind of like other platforms. But we also believe that when the government's actually easing the travel restrictions, that it will actually go back to a 50-50. So that's probably a not lasting trend we will be seeing. Nevertheless, also like as a result of the poll we just did at the beginning of the webinar, depending on how fast the market is recovering, this will probably remain for like 1 or 2 quarters more. In terms of length of stay, and this was actually something we didn't expect at all. So usually on our platform, the average length of stay is around 3 to 4 months. what we saw during Corona, that the length of stay was actually 10 to 20% higher compared to any other previous month we have seen in the last 5 years. In the beginning, we didn't really know why this is happening, but there are some factors who are actually driving the length of stay. One is corporates, at least the ones we are working with, instead of having 2 or 3 shorter trips, they actually now tend to do one longer stint, which can be a driver for a longer length of stay. The second reason could actually be, since the prices were dropping on service apartments and all the long-term accommodation providers by 30, sometimes up to 50%, the people who were searching for long-term apartments tried to make a good deal for a longer period of time. So instead of booking just like for 1 or 2 months, they just decided to book for 6 months in the beginning. So these are actually 2 factors why we do believe also length of stay will be something which will still be around also like post-COVID, at least when it comes to really, really long stays. When we talk a little bit about, and this is what the webinar here is about, what might actually change and what are corporates looking for? And one interesting factor, when we talk about cancellation policies or flexible booking terms, before Corona, and this is what you see on the left-hand side, a very, very small percentage of the suppliers who were listing their apartments on our website had a flexible cancellation policy. And flexible relates to a cancellation of 48 hours before the move-in date. So what you can see here, most of them has a very strict cancellation policy, some of them moderate, and a very, very small portion flexible. As of May, and I think the numbers are just like from last week, we saw actually an increase of more than 700% on flexible cancellation policies. And I give you now, in a couple of seconds, also a little bit of conversion numbers, what's actually driving this amount of flexible cancellation policies from those suppliers. What we hear from the corporate side, that flexibility in booking a long-term apartment will become the new standard in the industry. And we also need to say that corporate clients, when it comes to short stay bookings or the hotel industry in particular, they have very, very flexible cancellation policies there. So sometimes also 2 hours before arrival, they are actually allowed to cancel the booking. So we believe that even if Corona kind of like disappears, or we have actually managed through that, then flexible booking terms will still be like a very, very attractive thing for corporate clients going forward. In terms of how do corporates or business travelers book on our platform? So for those of you who have been working with Homelike for a longer period of time, you know that a year ago, we only had a request process. So corporates landed on our website, they needed to request an apartment, then the supplier accepts the request, and then the corporate could actually go ahead and book the apartment. By mid of last year, we changed the way how corporates actually book apartments on our platform, and we changed it to an instant booking flow, which basically means that corporates can go on the website, book the apartment right away without the supplier coming back if the apartment is available or not. And this was actually ensured through our property management and channel manager integrations we have been doing since then in a very, very significant way. What was actually interesting during Corona, and obviously one reason is that people were kind of like limited in their mobility, that the percentage of instant transactions on our website exceeded actually any of our budgeted numbers. And this actually keeps going. We are in May, we still have kind of like 10 days to go. So we do believe that this month will be a new record in terms of percentage of instant bookings. What we also hear in the market, and I think this is a very positive thing for the service apartment industry, that due to Corona, the acceleration of technology and the adoption of technology will change the industry for a longer period of time. And I think that's a huge opportunity for all service apartment providers and everyone who's actually in the long-term apartment industry. When we combine now the flexible cancellation policy and the instant booking mode, and we want to give you some data here from our transactions. What you see, the dark blue line is the conversion rate for the request process, and the other blue line is the conversion rate for apartments with a flexible cancellation policy and which can be booked instantly. And what's interesting here is that suppliers who have a flexible cancellation policy, as well as the instant booking mode switched on, they receive up to 40% more conversion on our website. And this is actually showing pretty nicely based on the data we have on our platform that those changes are necessary for providers in order to be a significant part of the post-COVID scenario. Talking a bit about lead time here. So lead time is defined as the time of the booking date to the move-in date. And what you see here are the numbers from February, March, and April. And what's super interesting that due to Corona, the lead time is less than 10 days for a lot of bookings. And this actually means that corporates make kind of like very last minute decision on bookings, which obviously affects also the response time of suppliers when it comes to accepting booking requests or kind of like processing the entire booking and transaction from the corporate client. We saw this development a little bit coming throughout the last 12 months, but Corona kind of like changed the way due to uncertainty in the market that corporates rather tend to be still uncertain and they wait until the very, very last minute in order to make a decision. There's one thing which will be interesting to see in the upcoming months, also when all the restrictions are being eased, when there's less liquidity in the market, and with liquidity we mean less apartments available, if then corporates will be somehow forced to make decisions earlier. This is actually an interesting development, and we're looking forward to see the numbers in the next couple of months. But we actually believe that flexibility as such, so a combination of flexible cancellation policies, lead time, so on and so forth, is something corporates will definitely gonna look forward also post-COVID. James, I know that I actually skipped our question 2 and 3, so I would actually ask you to poll the audience now on question 4 before we are heading to the next slide. So the question we have to the audience is, if you're taking any special hygiene measures regarding COVID-19, please specify. I'm gonna give kind of like the audience about kind of like 30 to 60 seconds in order to make the choice here, while I'm actually going to the last slide of the presentation. James, let me know when you have the results so we can actually dig a little bit into this one.
Okay, a couple of seconds. Got about 50% of everyone has just voted, so let's just hold fire a second. Okay, let's do that and share results. Can you see those results?
Yeah, thank you. Interesting. So I was expecting very low on not taking any, which is actually good. Contactless is something we have also been seeing a lot. Keyless entry also very high in the ranks here. And I think, James, that speaks for you guys. The ASIC stay with confidence promise. And this is also something, maybe to start off here, or to close off kind of like my presentation here. Standards are actually going to be the new normal in the industry. What we see across the board, and it's not only flexible cancellation policies or hygiene standards or contactless check-in, check-out, but standards, and I know that in the service apartment industry in the last years, we have actually made a lot of progress in standardizing accommodation, standardizing what is high quality, what is low quality, what is mid quality, so on and so forth. But standards, I think, is something really, really important also to put service apartments or the long-term industry apart from hotel, right? Because sometimes what we keep hearing from our customers is the hotel industry is very much standardized with star ratings, so on and so forth. But the service apartment industry, boarding house, furnished apartments, however you actually call that, depending where you are located across the world, it's still kind of like not standardized across all territories, all cities, all cultural environments. And we do believe that this is also a good time that the industry is actually united here in having probably not one standard, but at least not like 500 or 600 different standards, because that's making life super important and super difficult actually for corporate clients deciding what are apartments where I want actually to let my employees stay for a longer period of time. There are a couple of other things we actually see across the board, and we have also had a survey amongst our customers, duty of care. A lot of you guys probably know that from the hotel industry as well. There's good technology out there, and this is definitely something Homelike will also be releasing in the next couple of weeks and months. That's becoming very important, especially since corporates now taking probably even more care about their employees, especially kind of like questioning if a second corona wave is coming this autumn or winter or next year. So they want to be prepared. Second one, hygiene and health and safety. We talked about that. Longer stays. This is what we see, that the number of short stay trips, also due to technology like Zoom, what we are using here, for example, will also accelerate long stay stays. So there are actually some interesting facts also for service apartment providers, what that means for every individual here. Flexibility is something we also talked about, and we see as something super important. What we did as a company, I think on the 19th of March, so 3 days before kind of like Corona became prevalent in the press, we launched internally a project on flexible cancellation policies, which was obviously also a result of the good numbers now. And we do believe that this is something also post-Corona, where we as an industry can put us actually apart from hotels. And the very last one is fast response times. I think that's not only due to Corona. I think it's in general something which is super important for the industry. And we as a company here are also trying to push technology into the market and help the suppliers to make a higher return on invest through fast response time technology and product features we are applying. But this is actually, especially since competition is probably a little bit rising, also post-Corona, something we really see as a very important factor. So that was like a little bit of insights from our side. Whenever you have questions, and I saw a couple already coming in, I want to actually hand over to Mobia and to Kasia. We have been working with them for quite some time. It's a fantastic business. And yeah, really looking forward to your presentation. When the audience is having any questions about our business beyond this webinar, you can just send me a message on dustin.fig@thehomelike.com, and really looking forward to the questions. So hand over to you, Kasia. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Dustin, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm really happy to be a part of this webinar, and let me share the screen. Okay, so let me introduce the company and myself. Mobica is a global software services company, as James mentioned before, delivering enabling technologies that transfer business outcomes. Our main headquarters is in UK, nearby Manchester. We have offices in Europe and North America. Five offices are in Poland. I'm based in Bydgoszcz, the city in the north part of the country. And Mobica was founded in 2004. You can see what kind of technologies we deliver. The majority of our employees travel to the clients around the world. So the business travel is one of the most important elements of the company. I'm global travel manager in Mobica, and I'm responsible for establishing and running a smooth cooperation with our travel agency and any other travel suppliers like service apartments. I'm organizing and ensuring efficient operations like long-term apartments, short-term apartments, transfer, flights, and hotel programs. I'm also creating, maintaining, and executing the travel policy, creating customer expense estimates, and doing any other important administration stuff. Yeah, so I would like to share with you some data. So as you can see, the scope of our business and the COVID-19 impact on travels this year, so far this year. So from 1st January 2020 till now, we have booked 1,259 nights in service apartments. We also rent apartments directly from landlords or real estates, with 14 flats rented so far this year. And in comparison to last year, from January till the end of May, we booked 4,040 nights in service apartments and rented 27 flats. Air movement in the first quarter of 2019, we booked 340 air travels. And in this year, in the first quarter, we booked only 220 air travels. Our most popular locations are in Germany, Great Britain, Netherlands, USA, and Poland. So you can see that the number of booked nights decreased by almost 70%, and number of booked air travels decreased by 35%, which is a big drop for us. What's the mid to long-term impact of COVID on travel at Mobica? You've seen on previous slides that we can feel significant decrease in business travel due to unprecedented border closures and any other restrictions. And according to World Tourism Organization, all of the countries around the world impose restrictions on travel. I think that Mobica will use more often the virtual meeting technology, and this may drive the continued use of such technologies in the future, and for sure till the end of 2020. Also, I think that Mobica and any other corporates will deal with high skepticism in traveling to particular destinations like Italy and Spain. Also, I think that corporates will need to adjust their travel policies. We can say recalibrate their travel policies to the current situation, and this is something that I will be taking care of. Also, we will need to make long-term reduction in accommodation spendings. What's more, we are planning to consolidate suppliers, so we will choose more the suppliers that will give us let's hygiene protocols, and they will have some hygiene labels. So what I've been doing recently is I've been tracking the worldwide situation regarding travel restrictions, and it gives me a perspective that the business travel will, and any travel, will gradually resume in July. That's my predictions. It will depend on government's decision, flights availability. As we all know, most of airlines halts most flights. And however, some of them plans to restart flights soon, like Wizz Air, KLM, British Airways plans to resume half of flights from July, the same Ryanair, and Lufthansa Group to begin flying 80 more of its aircraft in June. So I think that's good news for all of us. And also now we know that some of the countries are willing to reopen the borders soon. I focus on the countries where we make business. So German government plans to gradually open borders from 15th of June. And UK prepares to manage the risk of transmission being reintroduced from abroad, and UK government will require all international arrivals to supply their contact and accommodation information. And second, the government will require all international arrivals to self-isolate in their accommodation for 14 days on arrival into the UK. And this is something that service apartments and companies like Mobica will struggle with. We will need to figure it out how to deal with this self-isolation in service apartments. Potentially, service apartments and the hotel industry will start to be a quarantine place for business travelers and any other travelers. And all such things bring us to the new normal. So let's move to the new normal checklist of requirements post-COVID. For me, the new normal means the new sanitary regime. I assume that corporates will look for apartments with COVID-19 hygiene protocols, which contributes to special treatment in room service, retraining staff in health issues. When I will look for apartments, I think that I will check this one with hygiene labels. The new normal, I believe that majority of corporates will want to gain, as Dustin mentioned, corporates will want to gain more flexible terms and conditions of reservation, cancellation policy. Will all need to be more flexible on the length of stay. And corporates will start looking for budget savings, and it will require from service apartments higher quality because of the new hygiene rules at lower cost, I think. What we all need to do is to ask the organization, should we just wait and postpone the problems or address the problems, identify them, and choose the win-win solution. So the win for corporates, the win for service apartments. Thank you for attention. That's all from my side, and I'd be happy to take any questions. I've seen that there are some of them, so I will just stop share screening.
Thank you very much, Cassia, and thank you, Dustin, also from you. I'd like to bring in Cecilia and Cherry. They've been patiently sitting there in the background, so thank you for joining us as well. Maybe what I'll do is just run through a couple of the questions that have come in during the course of the last sort of half an hour or so, if I may. A lot of it, interestingly, is around safety and the responsibility, as much as anything, service departments are going to operate. So I'll just throw it over there. So if anyone would like to contribute, please feel free. So how important do you think safety to the corporate will be moving forward? I think you pretty much covered that, but more about when booking serviced accommodation, and will it really play a part in the decision-making process? Maybe Cassia, perhaps you could take that one to start with.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. How important is safety to corporates? Of course, the safety of our employees, our engineers, is the most important thing, not only in COVID times. So it's very important, and as I have mentioned, I will be working with our suppliers and global travel agency and try to adjust the systems and filter the accommodations only with some hygiene labels. I think that's possible, and this is the question actually to you guys, if you have been already thinking about it, how to introduce the hygiene protocols and hygiene labels into your apartments.
So I mean, in terms of what we're all doing, it's without question probably the most important part of the association's work and what we're trying to do to differentiate. But just interesting from Homelike, what are your thoughts? Do you think that you're going to see this trend very clearly? Do you think people are going to ask questions as part of the booking process? I don't know, Cecilia or Cherry, what are your thoughts?
James, just before we answer that question, I was just going to ask if you wouldn't mind running poll questions 2 and 3,
of course,
because I think that would be linked almost to this question, just to kind of understand what some of the attendees are actually doing to address this.
Let's do that. So that's
great.
2 that's gone live, and this is how are you responding to the current crisis. Let's see how that's going. Right, let me, that's about 30 seconds. Let's see how that looks.
Mhm.
There you go.
Okay, interesting.
So how are you responding to the current crisis? Well, 68% said reducing prices, 26 said moving more properties to mid-long term, 65 said offering more flexible cancellation options, 85 said setting up COVID hygiene standards. There we are again. 56 said promoting the stay with confidence. Thank you for those who did. Shall I run the second one, Cherry? Would
Yes,
you be?
please. Yeah, that'd be great. So we just have one more.
There we go.
Yeah. So the third question is, which of the following changes do you expect to maintain post-COVID? Select all that apply. And so I guess we'll just give the audience 30 seconds before we collect those results.
Okay.
It's quite interesting. So the majority of the audience from a long-term perspective, expect to maintain the setup of special COVID hygiene standards, which I think you know is like a really good thing for corporates. And then the second one would be to kind of promote the ASAP Stay with Confidence promise, and I think the other ones was so flexible cancellation policies, maybe not really a long-term solution, along with the reduction of prices and workforce as well. So thank you everyone for that. Maybe I can pass over to you, Cecilia, to just answer that question based on what you've heard from corporates.
Sure. I think that corporates need to feel reassured, at least in the beginning, in order to start traveling again. So that we are all stepping up in the industry in terms of hygiene standards. That's great news, and definitely something that the corporates want to hear about.
Okay, a couple of other specific.
Sorry, will you have any hygiene certificates? How do you want to deal with it? Because you know that the corporates will need some proof that the place is safe, disinfected and clean.
Of course, we do have 10 standards that we need, that all the suppliers that work with us need to pass in order to be part of our listed suppliers. So we are probably going to be looking into stepping up the hygiene part too, although this is something that is already part of our standards.
Thank you very much.
No worries.
Okay, some of the other questions have come in. Somebody specifically asked, this is during your presentation, Dustin, I thought we could only connect via iCal rather than PMS, such as SiteMinder.
Yeah, so Lauren, thanks a lot for the question. So yeah, iCal is probably one of the most prominent integrations we do have, but we have in the meantime set up some PMS and channel manager integrations. I can't really comment on SiteMinder. I think the only mention I can do here is that this is in the making and there's some news coming up. I hope that answers the question enough here. But we have some existing PMS and channel managers we're working with, which is Rentals United, for example, Cubilis, Apaleo, Ignea, and a couple of others. When you're in particular interested in the SiteMinder integration, you can rather send me an email or the account manager at Homelike, and then we give you all the details and information you need in order to be set up for instant booking, so on and so forth.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much. Jane asks if we can send the presentations out afterwards, so we'll follow up with that when we can. Interesting one. How are we controlling the health and safety elements through supply chain? I think we sort of touched on that as well, but it's a direct question. How are you going to make sure that health and safety mechanisms and health and safety and cleanliness protocols are very evident to the buyer?
And maybe I can add a little bit to that and broaden a little bit also the question. I think first of all, it's really important that also what our company stands for is professional suppliers, right? I think there are also a lot of not professional suppliers. So I think this is the first kind of like quality element here. I think the second one is, and this is a little bit more complex, because also what means kind of like high health and safety, right? And what are the criteria? And I think also in this instance, ASAP can play a really important role here, defining the standards together with the service apartment providers, but also like with the corporates, right? As Kasia actually said, right? And I think also in terms to hygiene standards as such, also the responsibility of a platform like Homelike is to make sure that business travelers can travel safely, and that hygiene standards are actually in place wherever they're accommodated, right? And the interesting thing is, even before Corona, there's technology in place and also programs in place. And I think the ASAP, I mean, you guys have been here before COVID as well, right? And we also have standards. And I think this is what I mentioned throughout the presentation. I think all of this standardization, what do we do with pandemics going forward, what is about duty of care, I think all of this kind of like terms which were probably only familiar to very, very large corporate clients, right, not to SME businesses, so on and so forth, will now suddenly become important for everyone, and will become like a standard. And I think this is a very interesting development, because it doesn't only apply to a certain fraction of the business travelers, depending on if they work for large or small businesses. It applies to almost all people who are traveling. And this is a very kind of like interesting dynamic happening right now. But I also, when I speak about Homelike, we want to make sure that we have the standard which is applicable across destinations, so that corporates don't need to decide, okay, when I travel to Germany, the standard is very different when I would be traveling to the UK. It needs to be a standard across different markets.
Mm. Okay, there's a couple of questions that have come in for me, actually, so I'll take those very quickly. That's from Jono, thank you. Jono's asked if ASAP and ISAP plans to include the COVID-19 hygiene certification. So, Jono, absolutely, and in anyone else that that's listening that wants to know what ASAP is doing about recognizing increased levels of how the requirement for housekeeping and so forth. Yes, absolutely we are. Now, compliance and accreditation has been around for 7 years within the association, and ISAP is the organization, the entity that carries out the accreditation wing. So without doubt, compliance accreditation will embrace the needs to recognize enhanced housekeeping services. So, you know, we've been doing it, and we've always said for so long that compliance is all about health and safety, and safety involves the safety of the guests. So without question that we will include that. So if you haven't seen them, do drop me a line afterwards. We'll resend those. They go out in every newsletter every day, information on what we're doing. And Jono, Cassia asks you another question, which is quite interesting. So you mentioned the win-win. And how do you think that higher cleaning costs but lower pricing expectations, I think you knew this one was coming, is going to work for the operators? Surely corporates should expect higher pricing at these standards. It's a very difficult question, I understand, but really interesting one.
Yeah, the question is very difficult, and I think it's actually hard to answer this question. Yeah, for sure, the cleaning cost will be higher, but I have mentioned that probably corporates will be looking for some budget savings, and they will expect lower prices, lower pricing. I think that we can manage this by using more often virtual meeting technology, and then, you know, we will save some money on accommodation. And what do you think, Dustin? Do you think that the higher cleaning cost will contribute to to higher pricing for accommodation?
Yeah, Katja, I mean, yeah, thanks a lot for handing over this challenging question here, you know, but so I think, I mean, in general, not only for the service apartment industry, what we see in Germany, for example, by kind of like easing the restrictions, I mean, all industries need to invest more into cleaning, but they have less income. For example, the restaurant industry, right? I think in general, there will be a discussion, not only in the accommodation space, we need to spend more on making sure that we have hygiene standards, but people want to actually see the same prices, right? When I kind of like argue now from a service provider perspective, I would also say, hey, I need to spend more and I get kind of like less income on a nightly basis. How can that actually work? On the other side, at the moment, the demand which is coming in is not as high as pre-COVID, right? So there's more competition on the traveler or on kind of like companies like Mobica, for example. And I think that corporate clients will make a very, very wise decision on if they rather go for a lower rate in order to save costs with the same hygiene standards instead of kind of like spending more, because everyone needs to take a look on cash and liquidity. I think the hospitality industry and tourism industry in particular have been hit super, super hard. So I do understand the question, and I think there's not a perfect solution to that. And also arguing from a Homelike perspective, I would also love when the service apartment industry kind of like recovers faster. But I do believe that until the demand is not significantly picking up again, there will still be a lot of competition on the market, which then results into lower prices. But I hope that this will actually balance out at some point, maybe next year.
Right, well, thank you very much, Dustin, Cassia, Cecilia and Cherry. We've actually run over time. I knew we would. We allocated 45 minutes for the session, and I'm sure that we could continue significantly longer than that. But it only leaves me to thank you all very much for your time this afternoon. A very interesting session, and I'm sure as the questions come in later to me, I'll forward them on to you for further comments. So my sincere thanks again to every one of the panelists, and thanks for everyone joining us this afternoon.